Good morning. It's Tuesday. It's now 10 a.m. I'm still doing my chess training for today. As I said yesterday, my plan is to wake up earlier for maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks because I'm going to the tournament in Lviv, Ukraine, and I want to prepare. So right now I'm sitting in front of a chessboard for 2 hours already. I think it's still like half an hour to go. One thing which is I'm super happy with, this is a book by Kasparian. He's a chess composer. I'm sure you don't know about chess composition. So this is Kasparian. This book was published in 1988, and it consists of Etudy staty analizy, which means chess composition overall, and it's actually what I call chess poetry, because they use a limited number of pieces to present an interesting problem to solve, and usually you are super surprised like how much you can achieve with such a low amount of resources, right? And this is super inspiring to me because I really believe in this fact that, you know, even with a limited resources and even with constraints, this is actually something I learned from 37 Signals and DHH and Jason Fried. They often repeated that constraints are good, and I also believe in that. So even if sometimes in the business or in the programming you think that that's not enough, we can't do really too much about it, I'm inspired by these constraints, and by chess poetry I can see that, you know, putting the right resources in the right places will give really amazing results, unexpected results. So that's one way of how chess inspires me, and I'm really happy to do it in the morning. And I'm also happy because usually I'm not able to solve most of the exercises, but today, and I do two of them. I set a timer actually. So I said, you see the timer is going on from 10 to 0, and I'm trying to solve it. And today I've had 2, as every day, and I solved 1. That's 50%, not that often. A good beginning of the day. And another chess inspiration is how I'm improving my chess openings, which was usually my weak side. I found this website which is called Chessable, and in here I'm training my my openings, but instead of measuring how I'm doing well with the openings, because that's hard and not really easy to measure, I'm just saying I need to have a certain number of points every month. So I have this, this is my activity the last 2 months, and this is also the leaderboard. So I go there and I go to month, and now I see I have 82,000 points. My goal for a month is 300,000 points, which is quite a lot, so I need to catch up later this month. Also, it's a nice thing, I have now reached 1 million points in this website. So by this thing, the numbers, they don't mean anything, but at least they are measurable for me. So every month I can actually check whether I did it or not, and during the last months I did it, and I will do it also in October. So that's a good way for measuring, even though, and whether I'm better at opening or not, this comes with the results. And so far I've been looking at my opening, at my positions after the opening, and they were much better now after I'm training here. So I trust that this system is going well for me. It seems to work very well for me that I don't open neither email nor Slack in the morning. I start with my chess routine and my workout, and only at about 11 a.m. I open Slack and other notifications, and then I decide what to do next. And I have like 1 hour session of syncing. So if there's someone who needs to talk to me, if there's some emails to be sent, or some Slack conversation to happen, or some decision to be made, I'm actually really enjoying making decisions. That's a good timing for me. So what I noticed, I made notes what is working for me with Slack, for example, and other communication, and I see that most of the misunderstandings and miscommunications are happening somehow in the morning. So probably it would be a good rule in the company, just
don't use Slack before 12. So Christopher wanted to know my answer to this article, this blog post about the failing software architectures, and the critics of the current trends in software architectures was limited to CQRS, which I think in this article was confused with something else, event sourcing, and using local storage for single page applications with the risk of leaking security data. So the third point is also not really clear to me, like you can't really blame things like local storage or single page applications if they are misused for leaking data, private data. That's quite obvious, and obviously it shouldn't happen. With event sourcing, there are some valid points, and I don't want to be in a position to defend event sourcing as a technique on its own, even though I'm using it and I'm advocating this, because event sourcing is mostly a persistent technique. And I don't think any part of the current problems in our software world is due to the infrastructure parts. We have actually better and better tooling for that, and definitely it's not perfect yet, but we are getting there. So event sourcing on its own is just a persistent mechanism, but it's based on events, and this is the part which I think is really useful. So, fuck, this time it's a deer. I will have a heart attack one day here in the forest. Okay, domain events are useful, and if you have domain events and you want to have a really good coverage of your application with domain events, then event sourcing almost comes for free, so that's why I see it as a value. But event sourcing on its own, it has many good points, but it's not something that will radically change the way we do software. Domain events is also not such a technique, but this is the point which I like to talk about, because domain events, it's a technique for helping developers understand business and for helping business understand developers. This is the crucial point for me in my understanding of the world, in my understanding of the software situation right now, is that developers don't get business and business doesn't get developers. That's why I'm so involved in the domain-driven design world, because I see it as an opportunity to help as a bigger movement. So domain events on its own, they help developers understand the business. And I think most of the failures here now is that I put a blame on us. I think most of the problems with current software situation is because of us developers not trying, not wanting, not caring about the business. And I often in this situation where I see like developers answering me like, why should I be interested in how the business makes money? And for me it's like, what the hell happened to our industry? Why are we trying to put ourselves in this position that we are so isolated from the business? Why is business so often put as our enemies? I don't get it. Maybe it's because I live in this intersection of business and programming, but I really don't get it. This is where we get money from. It's the dependency is clear. We depend on the business in the first place, not the business depends on us. The business will just be developed slower without software developers. This is a fucking nightmare here in the forest. All right, enough of this rant. I will carry on later. What exactly does it mean that developers should get business and business should understand developers? I think it works both ways. So there's a loop. There's a constant feedback on both sides. And I don't believe in any kind of silver bullets like model-driven architecture where you describe some diagram and then you have a code generated. I don't really believe in that. I think it's all in the code, and the business should tell us what's important in the business. We should understand that. Then we should model this, ideally using the programming language, and do it in a way, model and implement it, do it in a way that it could be shown. So that's the second part of the loop, be shown to the business again. Yes, showing the source code to the business and asking them if we get it right. Obviously it requires writing code which is understood by the business, and that's the part which is difficult, and that's the part where we find as developers we're very good at finding excuses. We have not got good enough tooling, we were in a rush, there were deadlines, and the code is not clear enough to show to the business. So in the end we have a situation where the business has to trust us that the code is implemented in a way that they hope is right according to their requirements. And here I also can come down to the programming language level, because this is exactly why I believe one of the best programming languages to model any kind of business is Ruby. And I'm not using Ruby just because of some accident or because of some random choice. My choice was really well thought out, I like to believe, at least. That's the only language I know which gets us so close, at least lets us to be so close to the English language, which means we can communicate with the business with something which looks like English language. Once you start showing them any kind of other language which I'm aware of, obviously some are not that bad, some are somewhere in between, but let's say for example Python. I love Python, but showing all kind of self here, self there all the time makes the language really difficult, at least unnecessarily difficult to read by the business. And Ruby doesn't have this problem. Ruby doesn't have unnecessarily braces, even though I am an advocate of using braces where it's needed. But overall, you can write the abstract level, the abstract algorithm, the abstract business process in one place, show it to the business, and get it accepted or not. They can understand this. And with other languages, it's still possible. It's just an amount of boilerplate is added unnecessarily. And I don't expect business to write the code. I just expect the business to follow the code. Like for example, we can show them which folder in the repository they might be interested in following of the changes, so that when they look at you, for example, generate one report before some other report, and they know it's a wrong order for some reason because you need to make some calculations first in between, they will spot the difference. That's what they're able to do. So we are not showing the code to the business, which means our way of working is not transparent to the business. They are not able to follow the changes, even though they accepted one change recently. They have no idea which kind of recent changes could break everything and introduce lots of regressions, because they don't see our code. So why the business doesn't look at the code, right? We usually don't make some kind of permissions. They can go to GitHub and look at the code, but they don't do it because we don't make it friendly. And we don't make it friendly because we write code, and code is probably a good name for that. We write code which is almost like an encrypted text. So if you look at usually most of the pieces of the code which at least touches some of the business logic, they are a mix, an encryption of our domain with some persistent mechanism, some HTTP layer, some kind of third-party libraries. And this is where the business fails. They're not as good as deciphering this, decoding all this stuff. This is too difficult for them. And because we don't decouple all those layers, all those different, I will tell bounded context from domain-driven design concepts, it's just all in one place, then the business is not able to follow. We make it hard for them, and I think the blame is on us.